Can I have an honest moment with you? It's hard to navigate anxiety when you're also afraid that being anxious automatically means you're failing God. You want to face what scares you, but you may be too afraid to even start. You may not even know where to begin. And the whole time, there's this current underneath it all where you don't have control and you're wondering, why can't I just get it together? You're no longer just fighting the anxiety. You're fighting what you think your anxiety says about your faith because of the typical interpretations of verses like Philippians 4:6. If any of that just described you, I want you to hear this clearly from the beginning. None of that means you're failing at faith. It means you're human and you were handed a verse without ever being handed the rest of the sentence. I don't believe that's what God intended for you to hear when he gave us this instruction through Paul. So let's really take a look at this verse and clarify what it is actually teaching us to do when anxiety shows up. Let's dive in. Hello, my beautiful people. In case we haven't met, my name is Ashley. I'm a mental health expert on a mission to help Christians heal nonstop anxiety through Christ-centered neuroscience without the typical just pray more advice. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you can get notifications when I release our weekly content. I am so excited for today's topic because we're taking a up close look at Philippians 4:6. We're going to break this into 3 sections because I know there's something in this verse that many of us have completely missed. I did so for years. And now that I understand it, it completely changes how I relate to this verse. I no longer dread hearing it. I'm no longer offended when people say it to me, and I am actually engaging with that verse as its living, breathing word instead of a passive passage that is just sitting in my Bible. Now, last week we focused on the first 4 words of this verse, do not be anxious. If you haven't watched that video yet, I will link it at the end so you can watch it alongside this one. It really highlights why guilt and shame in response to anxiety doesn't actually make us less anxious. It creates another layer of anxiety on top of what you're already experiencing. So you definitely want to check that out. Today, we are going to further talk about what that phrase, do not be anxious, means, but we are also going to focus on the whole verse so we can have the complete understanding of it. Because if we're really honest, most of us know this verse. We have heard it countless times, but our attention tends to stop at those first few words. Now, depending on the version or translation of the Bible you're reading, you're going to see interpretations as do not be anxious about anything. Don't worry about anything. Be anxious for nothing. Never worry about anything. Have no anxiety at all. Do you see a pattern with this? No wonder we receive the message that Christians aren't supposed to ever experience anxiety. The English literally is saying that. If you've been taught that experiencing anxiety is sinful, you are going to become hyper aware of every anxious thought, every racing heartbeat, and every moment of fear until the point of looking for it before it even comes. This is what literally is happening to us. And suddenly, we're not just anxious about what's happening in our lives. We become anxious about being anxious. When that happens, you start to rigidly monitor yourself. Am I trusting God? Why am I still feeling this way? What is wrong with my faith? As it stands, the typical interpretation of this verse actually encourages avoidance, thereby rejecting the very thing that reminds us we're human. Our emotions, our limitations, our imperfections, and our complete dependence on God. Avoidance is one of the fastest ways to make anxiety and fear worse. And it's the way that the world deals with things. So sometimes we use our spirituality to avoid facing what's really going on inside of us. So I need for us to really slow down and look at the context, because when you pull a verse out of its context, we completely miss what God is communicating through it. So in this first section, we're going to look at what Paul says before verse 6. Now, Paul wasn't writing these words from a peaceful vacation home. Some theologians say that he was in a military prison, while others say he was under some type of house arrest. Nevertheless, he was writing while actively experiencing suffering and persecution at the hands of the Roman Empire. And the church in Philippi was dealing with its own problems. First, there was real concern about Paul. There was also internal discord within their church among them. There was also fear of their potential to face persecution. And on top of that, there were false teachers creating confusion, teaching that obedience to the law was necessary for salvation. So the church of Philippi were already in a state of worry and anxiety. And I think we can all agree that they had legitimate reasons to be worried and scared. Paul is addressing these facts, but he's speaking from personal experience as he has endured tremendous suffering, persecution, uncertainty, and distress throughout his ministry. In today's term, we could say Paul understood the assignment. He knew where he was headed, and he knew that they needed reassurance. So he starts the chapter off by expressing his love for them and encourages them to stand firm in the Lord. Then he specifically encourages conflict resolution between two church members in the next two verses. He wants them to all get back on the same page. Then he goes into verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. He is lending them some of the joy in his nervous system. Then he follows it up with verse 5. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. And then appears, do not be anxious about anything. Do you see what Paul is doing here? First, he's reminding them of the privileges of living a life rooted in Christ. The Lord is near indicates proximity, a direct relationship with God. Evident gentleness points to the ability for believers to live out the love of God. And rejoice demonstrates the joy we have because we're saved by the work of Jesus on the cross. Paul is setting the stage before telling them what to do with their anxiety. He is raising awareness of where they are anchored. Now let's get into the second section because we're going to explore what Paul is saying when he writes the words, do not be anxious about anything. To do this, we are, of course, looking at the Greek meaning of these words because the word choices give us more ability to accurately understand the Bible. The Greek word Paul uses for do not be anxious means pulled apart in different directions, divided or distracted. Isn't that what anxiety feels like? You're physically in one place, but mentally you're everywhere else. You're listening to this video, but your mind is already somewhere else trying to prepare you for what might happen next. Your attention is pulled in every direction by all the possibilities of what could happen. Both neuroscience and scripture point out the consequences of internal conflict. When our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and actions are pulling us in different directions, we experience tension and turmoil within ourselves. Our minds, bodies, and hearts are constantly trying to make sense of that disconnect. And the one goal that your body has is to bring things back into alignment, no matter what. Now, hear me loud and clear. Paul isn't saying you should never experience anxiety. He is not saying pretend you're not anxious. He is not saying stuff down your emotions. He is not telling the church of Philippi to try harder. Because if do not be anxious means never experience an anxious response, then we're left with a standard of perfection that no human nervous system can consistently meet. God doesn't require perfection. He never has. Plus, descriptions of anxiety throughout the Bible are there. And if God didn't expect them to never be anxious, then why would he expect that from us? So I have a hard time believing that Paul would be communicating something that clearly contradicts God's character and his understanding of us. Instead, Paul is saying, don't stay in that anxious state. If you are constantly stuck in worry and anxiety, your mind will become fragmented. That's why anxiety can feel so difficult to think clearly when you're in it. The more emotionally heightened you become, the harder it can be to access the part of your brain responsible for perspective, reasoning, and thoughtful decision making. This aligns with what I've said before. Anxiety itself isn't the problem. The problem is when we get trapped in anxiety cycles. that's where we see the harmful consequences. Overactive anxiety literally shrinks your living experiences and it drains your internal resources so that you become limited and ineffective. Whatever you feed inside of you will grow. Anxiety is very similar to a weed, and if it's not addressed, it will spread and take over. I promise you that. And instead of obeying God, you're going to be obeying the anxiety. This is what Paul is warning us about, because the deeper you get in the anxiety cycles, the more it will consume you. We're not simply talking about just a thought. We are talking about the whole mind and body response. And this is why I don't believe Philippians 4:6 should be used to shame people for having a nervous system, especially when God is the one that gave you the nervous system. Anxiety is one of the ways that your body responds when it perceives danger or threats. We need that. The goal is for you to learn what to do when it shows up so that you're not just living in chronic anxious states. If this video is speaking to you so far, go ahead and like the video, give me a thumbs up, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments as well. Now let's get into this third section. In this video, on a hopeful note, we are talking about Paul's method for navigating anxiety. Since anxiety distorts truth, the solution for navigating anxiety needs to include truth. And we know God is truth. The rest of the verse finishes up with Paul saying, "But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God." I like to think about this as a recipe because all parts are needed. The recipe starts with "in every situation," meaning there are endless opportunities for prayer as nothing is outside of God's sovereignty. Man, that is powerful. No matter how little or how bad it seems, it is under God's authority. God is interested in every part of your life because he's also interested in every part of you. Then Paul encourages them to bring their anxiety to God through prayer. Now, when it says prayer, we are not talking about sounding polished or coming up with the right words to say. We are talking about sincere, vulnerable, and heartfelt expression within a safe relational connection. Key word: safety. It's being comfortable enough to approach God in that space and saying sometimes, "Lord, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do here." Bringing it to him is for you and for the relationship, because every relationship requires consistent communication. The Greek word used here means turning toward God with desire, adoration, worship, and devotion. When you have problems, do you desire to talk it over with God? Are you genuinely interested in his advice? God doesn't just want you to pray more. He wants you to pray with an open heart posture. When I begin my prayers following a moment of anxiety, it looks a lot like lamenting, mourning, crying, expressing my confusion, asking questions, just really pouring out and releasing what's in my heart and what's on my mind. It's all over the place, but it is very freeing. Then I move into petition. The Greek word for it means humble request or pleading with the knowledge that you are lacking or needing something you can only get from God. So by petition, you're praying over a specific need, which means you need to be specific in what you're saying and what you're asking for. So instead of saying, "God, take the anxiety away," you can say, "God, show me what is causing me to feel anxious right now." Once you express where you are and you say that request, you're going to move into thanksgiving. Psychology, neuroscience, and the Bible all agree that gratitude is one of the most powerful psychological practices for human wellness. Generally, it helps people focus on what they have rather than what they don't have. But for us as followers, it also involves acknowledging God's grace and mercy and salvation, which are all unrelated to your circumstances. That means they can always be done. And worship is always a byproduct of thanksgiving and gratitude. Present your request to God further supports the rest of the verse. It emphasizes making your full experience in that anxious moment known to God through honest communication and expression. Through psychology and neuroscience, we know that the power of anxiety actually lessens when it is revealed or made known. You could just be talking to yourself or to someone else, but once you say it, it loses power. God isn't threatened by your honesty. He already knows what's happening inside of you, but he also needs you to know what is happening inside of you. You do this, and God may not change your circumstance, but he will change your disposition, your outlook, and your approach. And the most important insight I've gained about this verse is the relational direction described in each and every part of it. Anxiety pulls you inward. This method turns you toward God and His truth. And that's the anchor we need in this life. If you've been trying to overcome anxiety by putting more pressure on yourself, I am asking you to consider a different approach. This method mentioned in this verse is actually the basis of what I teach through Christ-centered neuroscience. Long before I had the language to explain what I was doing, I actually found myself practicing this. Starting about a year ago, I had just relocated to a completely new area. It was a happy time, but I was experiencing my usual level of general anxiety. And in this time, God drew me into His presence in a way that was not familiar. He began revealing to me that although I was maintaining my religious habits, I had been neglecting what mattered the most, our relationship. He also revealed I was so focused on Him magically taking my anxiety away and giving me the outcomes that I wanted that I neglected to see what He was trying to teach me as I navigated it. And as a therapist, I was well equipped with knowledge about anxiety and the nervous system, but it never really took root until I invited God to tell me how to live out that knowledge. And that's what the Word of God does. It tells us how to live that out. The goal isn't emotional numbness or pretending that you don't feel anything. The goal isn't becoming someone who never experiences an anxious moment. The goal is learning what to do when the anxious moment inevitably comes. And over time, those moments will just stay moments instead of days, months, and years. Like I said, your circumstances may not change immediately, but when you use this method, you can learn to face these circumstances differently. God is inviting you back to wholeness. It gave me a wholeness that I never experienced before. And this is why I created a space where Christians can understand their anxiety patterns, learn to restore nervous system regulation, and begin experiencing God's peace in a deeper, more embodied way through biblical truth and neuroscience. I know I said a mouthful, but hear me, I've been there. And now I know no other way to be. And I would love to see that happen for others too. To be free from the bondage of anxiety, to actually know what to do when it shows up. If you're wondering what Christ-centered healing could look like for you, I would love to walk you through that. The first step is clarity, and that's what you'll receive when you book your free call through the link below. This is a space for you to be really heard, identify where you're having the most challenges, and from there, we'll explore if this kind of support would be a good fit for you. There's no pressure or expectation that you have to commit to anything. This is simply an opportunity to ask questions and explore what this next phase of life could look like for you. Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to check out this video. And if you want to gain a better understanding of anxiety, there is a playlist on my channel called Understanding Your Anxious Mind. Click on there and you'll be able to find individual videos that further expand on certain concepts so that you know what is actually happening in your mind, your body, and your heart when you are experiencing anxiety. As you move through this week, I want you to remember that you are covered, seen, and loved by the Creator of all. I'll see you in the next video.